Hello everybody. We're going to be talking today about preparing your curriculum vitae, or your CV, and the cover letter. We're going to provide information on how to send out your CV. We're going to also be talking about the differences between CVs in this country, United States, and other countries. And we're going to generally talk about preparing for academic positions in colleges and universities. Generally, CV means course of life. It is a Latin phrase which means course of life and includes everything you've done, as opposed to resumes, which include mainly the highlights. So you're going to want to set up your CV so that you help the reader find the information that he or she needs to find. And you do this by positioning and by using keywords. You want to create a professional product that reflects your skills and your abilities. And you want to make sure that your department is very clued in as to what your CV is, so that they can make comments and recommendations about how the CV is going to be used. And you always want to keep your CV current so that whenever you're asked for it, you've got it on the ready. And one of the characteristics of a CV, or vita, that's another way to abbreviate it, is that there's no limit to the number of pages, as opposed to a resume, which is usually kept to 2. Each page following the first page should be numbered. And why should it be numbered? Because you want other people to find it clearly and easily. And so saying 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4 assists in that process. Every page ought to have your name. You don't need an objective. That's one characteristic of a CV. You're not telling them. They know from looking at the CV that it is a CV. You don't have to write the words curriculum vitae on there either. You're going to include identifying information, contact information, because of course you need to be able to be found quickly and easily. You're going to use reverse chronological order within categories, so you're going to give people an easy way to locate information. And you're going to use formatting techniques to help draw the eye to various information that you think is important, such as uppercase letters, or bolding, or indenting, or italics. But you do want to use these techniques consistently. You don't want to begin using it at the beginning of the resume and then taper off towards the end. Now here's some sample CV categories, and you're going to order them on your CV following your education category, depending on what kind of a position you're looking for. So for example, if teaching is your main focus, teaching is going to be one of the first categories that appears. But here are some of the other categories that you may encounter, such as research, research interest, publications, skills, and so on. So it's a good idea to know this terminology so you can set up your categories accordingly. It's better not to have very dense categories. It's better to break your categories into smaller units, once again to assist people in helping them find information. Let's start with the first category. The first category is, as I mentioned before, the identifying or the contact information. And some of it is pretty obvious, but you want your name, and you want your name in a form that you're usually known as. For example, if you have a name that is very foreign sounding and you're worried about how that's going to be perceived, you might use your Americanized name in parenthesis on the CV. Secondly, you want to be very reachable as far as your address goes. So you might have a lot of addresses, your home, your office, other addresses, wherever you can be located. Your cell phone number with a professional message is important. Having your home phone or your phone in your office may be useful as well, but you want to make sure it's dedicated to you only so that you're not having someone else pick it up. And again, your message needs to be professional. Your email ought to be professional as well. Probably not the university that you're graduating from. You don't want to be perceived as a student. So therefore, using a Gmail or AOL or one of those is a good idea. If you have a personal web page, you want to put that right up front, because that will give people a clue that you have lots and lots of good information to share. And you want to put on your LinkedIn URL if you have one, and I'm going to encourage you to definitely have one because it's becoming very common and very popular. The second category is your education category. As I mentioned before, this is very critical and always comes first on a CV after you're identifying information. Here's an example from Marjorie Nichols' CV. And you can see that she's put on there the school that she graduated from, her degree, her dissertation topic, and in this case, her committee, a whole committee, not just her advisor. Depending on your department's protocol, you may include the committee or you may not. She's also included a focus for her MA, and as a student at Drexel, she gave her degree of her focus area or her major, which is astrophysics. So all of this is very clear and easy to see. Now notice that the dates are off to the right. Generally, we recommend that because we read from left to right, so the first thing people see are the degrees and the institution as opposed to the date. So it's okay to put the dates to the left as long as you're going to be consistent, but there's absolutely nothing to be gained from that. But there is something to be gained from having your dates to the right. Notice that everything is sort of against the right-hand margin. This is an easy way to do it. You can use a table to do this or simply to tab until you reach the end. The next category is teaching experience. Now, we mentioned before that you have to be consistent. Notice how teaching experience is put into a paragraph form. Now, it's not a paragraph in the sense that there's I, me, and my in there, or that they're complete sentences. They're fragments that are strung together to look a little like a paragraph. You'll see that some people will use bullets, take those little fragments and string them vertically into bulleted fragments. In a CV, it's generally recommended that you use the modified paragraph as opposed to bullets. There's nothing wrong with bullets, but bullets are much more suggestive of a resume. And CV, the protocol is to keep it more like a modified paragraph. So we have, under teaching experience, the place where you taught, your title, and the times when you taught it. And you might break it into different kinds of academic units of time, fall, spring, and so on. You don't need to put the exact months unless there's an overlap, but usually people have a very good understanding of what goes on in an academic semester. You want to use action verbs. Notice that each fragment is begun with an action verb, like developed or organized or taught. So it's a good idea to think of good action verbs, not to repeat the same verbs, and to give a good explanation of what went on in the classroom, especially if you're looking for a teaching position. They are very interested in knowing the full scope of what you contributed to the classroom. Now, if you were a teaching assistant, you might want to mention the name of the professor that you worked with. Don't have to, but it's a good idea to do that. And then you would say what your role was in the classroom. And even if you were the one who you assisted, there are certain things you might have done on your own, or you can take part of the credit of collaborating with a senior individual. Notice too that this person did not put the number and the name of put the name but not the number of the course. I think it's a good idea to also include the number of the course, because in case someone reading this wants to look the course up in the course catalog, they can easily find it. So here's some examples of some of action words you can use to really punch up your description of your teaching. And taught, instructed, tutored, mentored, advised, and so on. And you want to use the present tense when you're talking about what you did currently, and then the past tense when you talk about what occurred in previous times. Use the first person implied, not the third person, meaning you want to suggest by your prose that you're using I as the subject as opposed to she does this or he does this. It just makes for kind of stilted reading when you don't use the first person. You also might want to have a teaching interest section, especially if teaching is your focus. And you want to mention classes that you'd like to teach in the future. And it's a good idea if you're applying for a particular job and you see that they want you to teach certain courses, that you mention that those particular courses are of interest to you and that you would be wanting to teach those classes if you were hired. Now the next section would be the research experience section, unless, of course, you decide that research is your main focus, in which case this would be the main topic that underlies your education section. So for research, we're going to talk a little bit about your doctoral dissertation. I want to mention, too, that if you're a postdoc, this is a chance to put your postdoc research first, followed by your doctoral work. And then if you did research as an undergraduate or research through a master's degree, that would be included as well, going in reverse chronological order. So as you can see, this person did a brief description of his or her doctoral work, and then talked a little bit about an NSF Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship that he or she did. Now I want you to see something that's a little disconcerting about this, and that is that a different font has been used for the research, the doctoral work, and for the NSF Summer Undergraduate Research Fellow. Consistency is very important in a CV, and I would advise this person to use the same font for each experience throughout the whole resume. Now you could draw attention to something by underlining or by bolding or by indentation, but I'm not sure at all that I would use different fonts for each. Here's another individual who put research and work experience together, and you can see that there is some latitude as to how you group things. But for this individual, she put her graduate research assistantship in the department and the university and the state, etc. But there isn't any explanatory material about this. Now, if this person was applying for a research position, it would be very critical to put some more information there about what this person did as a graduate research assistant. And same thing with the graduate fellowship and so on. So my recommendation would be that you flesh out and give a lot of depth to topics that you think are going to be critical and you're getting hired. This is just a sort of a very sketchy outline and might work if the person's focus was really on teaching and didn't really want to go into depth about his or her research. Once again, we see reverse chronological order taking place there. Publications is a very important part of the CV, and it's usually linked with research and would follow research in order. What you're going to do is divide your publications into refereed articles, book sections or conference proceedings, abstracts, or articles in progress. If you have one of each, you might group them all together in one category. To shorten the CV, you might group all of your publications into a selected publications section, because you have so many that you just think it will take up too much space, and therefore you want to shorten it a bit. This is done sometimes on a resume in particular. The way you set up your publications is really dependent on what your department prefers. So I suggest you consult with your department before citing publications on your CV. You will notice, though, that your name, the name of the person who's writing this CV, gets highlighted. Even if you're the 6th author, you would highlight it in the correct order on your CV. Conference presentations deserves a place, posters, invited lectures. Now, some people will think that conference presentations don't deserve to be on a CV, but they definitely should be, along with the topic that you presented. Posters, many people have done poster sessions, and that should be in its own topic. Now, invited lectures is a very useful category if you're particularly looking at teaching, if that's your focus. Oftentimes, invited lectures belongs in that section. However, you could put it in 2 places if you chose to do so. Here again is a section on publications, rather on presentations, and it's something that I think enhances your CV and is very interesting to read. Here are a few other categories that you should definitely have on your CV. University service, leadership, community service. Remember that when you are coming up for tenure, service is a very important category after teaching and research. So therefore, make sure that you illustrate that and you demonstrate that before you ever get the position in higher education. So if you aren't already involved with some kind of service, you should definitely become involved. And these are just a few of the topics you might have on your CV. Memberships in professional societies with the dates, very important too. You want to show that you have an interest that goes beyond just your immediate universe. You also want to have a section on professional development. Professional development involves things that you do to enhance your skill set. The HETC program, the Higher Education Teaching Certification Program at the University of Delaware, is a prime example of the kind of professional enhancement, professional development you might do. There are also workshops that you take from time to time that make you a better professor, make you a better teacher, make you a better researcher, and those belong in that category. There's a skills section usually, and this pertains to your technology and foreign language skills, but there could be other ones as well. Don't assume that everybody knows that you know statistical software or special programs or desktop publishing. Make sure that all of that is communicated. Make sure that people know that you know social media. In this day and age, you really do look connected, saying that you can use those techniques with your students. Additional information. This isn't necessary, but sometimes putting your hobbies or some special kinds of collections that you're involved with, or the fact that you've won several medals in a marathon, can break the ice and be an interesting topic for people to bring up when you go for an interview. So you don't want to have a lot about this, but occasionally there'll be something really unique about you that would definitely be a conversation starter, and you'd want to put that on your CV. It's going to be in the last position. Remember, we're working with the most important material and we're moving backwards to the least important material, but you still want it to be there. And last but not least, we have the references. Now, on a typical CV, references appear. The names, the titles, the institutions, and so on appears directly on the CV. There are some departments, however, that don't like this and that prefer that their references appear on a separate sheet of paper or not at all unless they're asked for specifically. When people put their references down, they may annotate them. So they indicate which references are going to be for teaching, which for research, and perhaps which for service. Once you've finished your CV, the time has now come to send it out. The first and most critical piece is that you follow the job application directions, that you send things out as they are expected to be sent out. So you want to look and see what they want. Do they want you to send your CV electronically? Do they want you to mail it? Do they want you to fax it? It's always a good idea to follow directions. You don't want to start out on the wrong foot, showing that you simply do your own thing and you don't follow what other people want you to do. So you want to prepare a Word version of your CV, a PDF version. Usually when you send something electronically, the safer way to do it is through a PDF, and perhaps a text version as necessary. So if you're going to be pasting your CV into a text box, generally a text version works a lot better because you don't have margins that are kind of like all over the place. You may not need a text version, but it's always a good idea to have one available just in case. If you're asked to send it, to mail your CV, then you want to select good quality paper for a print version. Sometimes it's good to have a bunch of them on hand anyway, print versions. In case you go for an interview and others haven't had a copy of your CV, you can always share a copy with them. Also, when you go to conferences and so on, it's good to have a print version. So it's always good to have your CV in many different versions so that you can apply for jobs and you can share your CV in the most appropriate way possible. Now, when you send your CV along with your cover letter does a lot of introductory work, and we're going to be talking more about cover letters in future videos. For now, you want to make sure that you keep in mind that the way you are sending and what you're sending along with your CV is going to be included in your cover letter. In other words, if you're going to be in the envelope placing all kinds of other attachments, perhaps a copy of the chapter of your dissertation or some other material, you want to state that in your cover letter. Similarly, if you're sending your CV electronically and you have a lot of other documents that are to follow, you want to mention that these documents are all attached. So when your CV is completed and you've put it into all different forms and you're ready to send it out, you need to stop and do one last thing, and that is you need to run it by a number of people. You need to give it to people to read, proofread, because you want this to be a very accurate document. You don't want any typos, and it's so easy to overlook that kind of information on our own documents. So you're going to make sure that others read it, particularly your advisor and other people in your department, to make sure that you have fulfilled all the necessary requirements. Ultimately, your true test of whether you've written a good CV is whether you're going to be asked for an interview, and hopefully all of you will be.